Beer has always held a special place in American life. In this video, we're looking back at the iconic beers Dad kept on hand, Grandpa cracked open on Saturdays, and maybe the first ones you ever tried. From Miller High Life and Hamm's to forgotten favorites, most are gone, and the rest just don't taste like they used to. So get comfortable, and let's remember the beers that made the good times even better. There was a time when Miller High Life really was the champagne of beers. That clear glass bottle with the gold foil on top, it just felt special, even if you were drinking it in a lawn chair in the driveway. It had this smooth, easy taste that didn't try too hard. And remember when Miller Lite first showed up? Folks were amazed. Tastes great, less filling, was everywhere. But for me, High Life had that old school charm. These days, you can still find it, sure, but it's not the same. The ads don't hit like they used to, and somehow the flavor feels more like a memory than a beer. Falstaff isn't a name you hear much anymore, but back in the 60s, it was a big deal. It was the third largest brewery in America at one point. Maybe you never tried it yourself, but I'll bet your dad or your grandpa had a few in the fridge. Forget fancy craft brews. Falstaff was the king of no-nonsense beer, brewed for folks who just wanted something cold and refreshing after a long day. They named it after Shakespeare's big-bellied, beer-chugging character, Sir John Falstaff, which gave it that rowdy, everyman charm that folks loved. These days, it's long gone, just another name from the past. Ballantine Ale goes way back. This one was big long before most of us even had our first sip. Back in the 40s through the 60s, it was one of the top names out there. That little ringed logo with the purity, body, and flavor slogan was everywhere. It was known for its bold, full-bodied flavor, something that set it apart from the typical brews of the day. Pabst Brewing Company continues to produce it today, though it's not as common as it once was. Just hearing the name brings back a time when beer had personality, and Ballantine had plenty of it.
Billy Beer!
Billy Beer. Now there's a name that takes you straight back to 1977. It was launched with a lot of hype, named after President Jimmy Carter's brother, Billy. His name, and even a personal message, were printed right on the can. But despite the buzz, the beer itself didn't quite live up to expectations. And here's the kicker, Billy himself reportedly preferred Pabst in private. By 1978, Billy Beer was already on its way out. The whole thing came and went in a flash, but those bright orange cans, they became collector's items and a strange little footnote in American beer history. Rheingold, a beer that was popular in the middle of the last century. Light, crisp, and dry. It had a clean taste that was easy to enjoy. And who could forget that catchy jingle?
My beer is Rheingold, the dry beer.
Think of Rheingold whenever you buy beer.
It was on every radio and TV set back then. In the 40s and 50s, Rheingold was a staple in many households, especially across the Northeast. It wasn't fancy, but it had a loyal following. Rheingold's heyday faded by the late 1970s, when production finally came to a stop, marking the end of an era. Though it's no longer around today, that jingle and those memories still hold a special place in many hearts. Olympia Beer was once a familiar sight in fridges and corner bars all across America. After Prohibition, it built up a solid reputation, helped by its catchy slogan, "It's the water."
Olympia, it's the water, and a lot more.
That line wasn't just marketing. They brewed it with artesian spring water, and people swore they could taste the difference. Olympia held its own for decades, but like many classic labels, it started to fade in the 70s as the beer industry began to consolidate. Production shifted hands a few times, and by 2021, it was quietly discontinued. A once proud brand, now just a memory tucked into old photos and bottle cap collections. Krueger's Cream Ale and Krueger's Finest Beer weren't just names from the past, they changed the game. Back in 1935, these were the first beers ever sold in cans, kicking off a whole new way to enjoy a cold one at home. It was a bold move and it paid off fast. Within months, Krueger was canning thousands of beers a day. For a while, it looked like the future. But by the early 60s, bigger breweries had muscled in, and Krueger's eventually disappeared from shelves. Born way back in 1865 in St. Paul, Minnesota, Hamm's was more than just a beer. It was a whole vibe. That catchy jingle, the playful bear from the old commercials, it all felt like something right out of a simpler time. For many of us, Hamm's was the kind of beer your dad or grandpa had stocked in the fridge. It's still around today, brewed by Molson Coors, but it sure doesn't have the same place it once did. These days, it's more of a throwback, something with retro charm that brings a smile to those who remember, and curiosity to a younger crowd chasing a taste of the past. Red, White, and Blue was a beer with a patriotic name and a rich history. It first rose to popularity during World War II and later found new life in the 1980s as a favorite for those looking for a budget-friendly brew. Originally brewed by Pabst and later by Heilemann, it was known for its smooth taste and low price. A radio ad once jokingly called it an honest beer at an honest price, and that slogan actually helped boost sales by 60%. These days, it's rarely seen on shelves, but the simple charm and patriotic spirit of Red, White, and Blue still echo through American beer culture. Bud Dry had its moment in the spotlight back in the late 80s and early 90s. It was part of the Bud family, and folks still remember the catchy slogan.
Try Bud Dry.
It was brewed using a dry brewing process that gave it a crisp, lighter taste that stood out at the time. But by the mid-90s, Bud Ice came along and stole the show. Bud Dry slowly faded from shelves and was officially discontinued in 2010. It never became a classic, but it earned its spot in the rotation, and that's saying something. Schmidt's beer had a quiet charm, but it knew how to stand out. During World War II, it became the unofficial beer of the American Armed Forces, thanks in part to the fact that the owners were personal friends of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. That connection helped Schmidt's land in the hands of troops overseas. Later on in the 1950s, the brand changed hands, but its image stayed strong. One of the coolest things about Schmidt's was the wildlife artwork printed right on the cans. It turned a 12-pack into something of a collector's item. For some folks, the cans were almost as memorable as the beer inside. Jax Beer was a crisp, German-style Pilsner that found its footing in the South. Born in Jacksonville, Florida, it quickly became a local favorite. Simple, refreshing, and easy on the wallet. In the 1940s, Jax made history by introducing one of the first six-packs in America, offering convenience long before it was the norm. After merging with Jackson Brewing in New Orleans, the beer kept rolling through the 50s, 60s, and even into the 80s, when it was brewed by Pearl. But by the time Pabst took over, Jax was fading from shelves. It quietly disappeared by the early 2000s. Pete's Wicked Ale holds a special place in many people's memories. It was often the very first craft beer they ever tried. Launched in 1986 by Pete Slausberg, it brought bold flavors and a unique style at a time when big breweries still ruled the shelves. Pete's helped open the door to the craft beer revolution long before it exploded into the booming industry we know today. The beer was considered innovative for its time, but after the company was bought by Gambrinus in 1998, the recipe was changed, leading to a loss of popularity. Production ended in 2011 due to declining sales. Brown Derby was a no-frills Pilsner brewed by Humboldt Malting and Brewing exclusively for Safeway supermarkets. It was the kind of beer you grabbed alongside your groceries, affordable, reliable, and unpretentious. Without flashy ads or hype, it served its purpose. When Safeway sold off many of its stores in the late 1980s, Brown Derby quietly faded from shelves, discontinued in 1988, a modest brand that vanished with little fanfare. Meister Brau was once a familiar name, especially in the 1960s, when it was one of the first beers to experiment with a lighter brew. It wasn't trying to impress, it was just a good, simple beer. By 1972, though, the company ran into financial trouble, and Miller Brewing stepped in. They didn't just buy the brand, they took the light beer formula and ran with it. That recipe became the foundation for what we all came to know as Miller Lite. So while Meister Brau eventually disappeared, it quietly helped kick off a whole new chapter in American beer history. I'd love to hear in the comments what your favorite beers were, and maybe some I didn't mention. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any future videos. Thanks for watching and for being part of my channel. See you in the next video.